Let's face it, modern tables are built like shit. Flimsy, pencily, rickety. Wait a minute. I built this. My bad.
Get you a trestle table. Ancient design with ancient examples still surviving today with good reason. The originals had simple enough construction for a peasant to build, yet were robust enough to perform post-apocalyptic open-heart surgery while feeding a family of 12, all at the same time. While I do like simple, maybe not too simple, a little more... Alright, f*** it. This table's getting all the bells and whistles. Reclaimed lumber, all wood joinery, epoxy, and some mistakes.
After all, we're going to be living with it forever, and you can live with it forever too if you'd like. Plans are available on my website for purchase if all this interests you. We got a lot to cover today, so let's get started.
Just look at this character. I dismantled an entire historic antique factory here in Detroit to get these beams. The woodworking equivalent of killing a whale. I'm just kidding. I didn't do it. Whoever did wasn't exactly thorough about removing nails. Coward. We'll have to pull them out ourselves. I would sure hate to hit them with any of my tools. They're also covered in this strange white residue. Given the age, it's probably asbestos or cyanide. They just loved their deadly substances back then. These big nails are pretty cool. There's a good chance they were forged by hand. Some of them are too far gone, but some are worth saving for a rainy day. Like most antiquity salvage, these boards come with their own mummy's curse. Most of the nails are actually embedded deep inside the wood. Too blown out to gain purchase with pliers, but most certainly still too hard to spare a blade. I should have known better, but we may be able to figure out a workaround. I'm marking them as I see them for now. We'll reassess after we make our selects. On the bright side, the scraper is hinting at some pretty good looking wood underneath all the rubbish. We won't be able to make the table entirely out of these big timbers. With all these wretched obstacles and checked ends, there just isn't enough usable stock. Lucky for us, 2 historic buildings were destroyed for this very contingency. And now for a dance with the most controversial tool in the shop. The Radical Anarchy saw, just barely able to get through these 3-inch timbers. Cut right through a nail without flinching though, so it's got that going for it. Milling these things all in one piece would be ideal, but some of these timbers have some pretty nasty twist. So working with them in smaller sizes means you don't have to mill them as aggressively to correct it. I'm making my first rounds of dimensionalizing on the boards I've determined to be the most naughty. I guess if I can make these work, I can make anything work, you know? They really pretty much have every red flag you could find on an old board. Nails galore, checking, rot, credit card debt.
Listen, I would love to just run these boards through the mechanical planer, but mechanical planers don't actually straighten boards necessarily. At least in the way joiners do. Their main function is to make sides parallel to one another, so they won't remove cupping, twisting, or warping. As they are, these boards need an attitude adjustment. So I'm giving them a piece of my mind.
Alright, these should be flat enough for the machines. Let's take the narrow piece over to the joiner.
Joiner? I hardly know.
I splurged for a used joiner that had a segmented cutter, and let me tell you, this thing is unstoppable. In the 3 or 4 years I've had it, I've yet to rotate any of the cutters, and it still cuts through anything I throw at it like it's nothing. I absolutely love it. Not like my little lunchbox planer.
Planer? I hardly know.
Stop it, where every new day feels like a miracle. At least this wood is pretty soft. But I can realistically only take off a 32nd of an inch at a time. The large boards really tried this thing's limitations. And chipping the blade on nails sure doesn't help either. Man, lugging these things around, I'm really starting to get a sense for how much this whole thing is gonna weigh. And according to my calculations, it's somewhere in the ballpark of the main riff off Soul-Sick Nation.
It's just so f***ing heavy!
I will now attempt to run these big boards through the joiner. Okay, well that didn't work. Too much to balance in that little fence. I always hated that joiner. I guess it's back to hand planing. Though I have since upgraded to a 7-foot level, and it really takes the guesswork out of it. Edges are looking good, and to think I only managed to hit like 7 nails. Now for the other side. I determine the shortest distance and strike a line with a panel gauge. This side goes much quicker because you have, another nail, because you have a visible reference to work toward. While posting progress on Instagram, someone pointed out that I should be using a pinpointer to get nails before they get me. It's like a mini high accuracy metal detector. They're not wrong. I just never did it. I couldn't help but notice one of these boards was rotten to the core. It looks like this side held up a roof or something that literally couldn't even, so the beam had to do its part to shed water for the structure. The end is the worst of it, so I'm carving it out and filling it in with some scrap that looks a little less sickly, so the glue has something to stick to. If you've witnessed other glue-ups of mine, you may be wondering why I'm not using my hardware store special panel clamps. They were my first choice, but the bars I have for them just aren't big enough for this tabletop, and I don't currently possess the means to whip up some new ones quickly. Plus, the thickness of these boards is uneven because they still weren't straight out of the planer and I had to do more hand planing off camera, so they wouldn't have worked properly anyway. I get asked about those clamps all the time. I'll do a video on them eventually, but for now there's free plans on my website if you'd like to make your own. Oh, hit another nail. Don't have a huge shooting board just laying around, so I figured I'd make a fake one with plywood and elevating with 1/4-inch MDF so the blade would clear the bottom. But honestly, planing like this sucks, even with a proper shooting board. I'm always bashing my knuckles and it just feels so awkward. I found just elevating the board another 3 inches or so was way more productive. Plus, I can throw my double square on the bottom surface too. If my eyes don't deceive me, and it's rare that they do, but not unheard of, there's still about 1/8 of an inch of variation in these boards. Nothing a few hours of pushing some old iron around can't correct. To quote Stanley's cherished company mascot, Mr. Flat, soon it will all be flat. If you're a table guy, or a table gal perhaps, then maybe you're already familiar with breadboard ends. If no, it's basically mortising and tenoning a perpendicular board on either side of the tabletop to counteract wood movement. It's among the more complex joints on this whole project I was kind of on the fence about adding, but if this table's predecessor has taught me anything, it's that it will slowly, but surely, turn itself into a canoe if left unchecked. In the spirit of making this operation go as quickly and efficiently as possible, the router is the best route. Not exactly sure why I didn't just dig everything out there, but at least I get to use the novelty-sized clown chisel. Truthfully, I've never used one of these before, but I can see what all the fuss is about. Lots of mass equals lots of inertia, so you're fighting the wood a lot less than if you were using, say, a lesser chisel. Just be careful impulse buying clown chisels on eBay. I spent the better part of 3 weeks lapping this thing to get it flat and functional. But not everything I buy on eBay is a lemon. At least that's what I tell my wife. Case in point would be this sweet little 8-inch pea shooter distant back saw. I don't think anyone actually calls it that. About a weekend's worth of effort to get back on its feet. It's a saw, it doesn't actually have feet. I've opted to bash these ends into shape. For this softwood, this technique all but guarantees crushed grain for a functional, but nonetheless, unsexy finish. A fine operation for a joint that will never see the light of day, but low-key, I'm probably hitting my chisel too hard here. Here's how you should actually do it. Pare away about 1/8 inch up to your scribe line, and then just start beating the shit out of it. But again, less than I'm beating the shit out of it. A few passes with the bevel facing your line, and then as you establish a channel, bevel facing away from your line, getting progressively closer to it. Ideally, you increment your depth 1/4 of the way down, and then flip the whole thing over, and then do the other side. This will do a better job of preserving the grain fibers. Wait a minute. I don't think this one even had any entrance or exit holes. It was just in the board. My first choice for trenching these ends would be a few quick passes on a table saw with a dado stack. But sadly, the table saw I ordered months ago is yet to arrive. Second choice would be a Stanley 45 combination plane, but the knots in these boards are a deal breaker for that tool. And I am absolutely not, no way Jose, spending the next 2 weeks chiseling this all out by hand. My third choice is boring it all out on a drill press with a Forstner bit. Still a bit more tedious than I'd like, but it beats the latter. If you do this for any reason, remember the Forstner bit has a little point that sticks out past the cutting edge, so don't drill full depth in the ends of your stock. Additional cleanup is all but certain with this technique, since you'll never get a perfectly smooth side with the drill press alone. But even if you did, it's good practice to go through and check all the sizes and distances and be certain everything will fit right. Several times. Then several times more. There is no true full-depth test fitting these ends because once they're on there, there's no getting them back off. It was right around this time in the build the camera fell face down and smashed my mid-range lens, and I had to use the zoom lens for a couple of days. Nothing against power drills here, but the brace bits are long and it's easier to gauge whether or not you're drilling straight. When it comes time to glue up these breadboard ends, we only actually glue up the center tenon. The two outside tenons get these goofy oval holes to allow for wood movement without causing the table to explode. The dowels will be drawboard, meaning the hole in the tenon is offset oh so slightly so the action of driving the dowel in the hole draws the two pieces together. Get it? Draw, bore. Okay, I'm reading the script and it just says something about vampires. Anyway, there was a lot more cleanup and back and forth between the top and the ends and making them fit I'm not showing, cause ain't nobody got time for that. You're here for the real show. Watching me botch a glue up. Well, here it is, you scoundrels. Your filthy entertainment. It all started out according to plan. I quadruple checked everything, then checked it again. I loaded the holes, the center tenon and mortises with white chocolate syrup butter, with its unforgettable catchphrase ringing in my head all the while. Oh my god, it's all starting to solidify inside me. It's pretty primal from here. Slip on the end like a syrup-filled 3-finger glove and tap away with your most overly complex wood mallet until it's flush with the tabletop. Only one side was never flush, which is where it all came crashing down. I drove the first pin in on the far, actually flush side, and the board split down a natural fissure that was too close to the joint. Don't love it, but short of having a different board, there's really not much I could have done. A shortcoming of working with limited stock. For the other side, however, which wasn't actually flush, I put too much faith in the strength of the wood, assuming just driving the remaining pins progressively closer to the other end, it would pull itself together. This was not the case. The pins exited south of center and caused some splitting throughout. No matter how far into the future you're watching this, you can rest assured I'm still kicking myself over it, even if I'm dead. On the bright side, the other end went way smoother. The joints are tight and there's no splitting. Lesson learned, I guess? Despite the unfortunate blunder, I really don't think that fouled end is going anywhere anytime soon. Either way, there's no time to mourn. We've got trestles to assemble. Oh shit. When did that get here? I sure could have used this thing for every other step of this project, but better late than never. Well guys, it's been a rough road so far, and we haven't even gotten to the unpaved area yet. It is finally time to address the operation I've been dreading the most on this entire project.
sliding dovetails. I'll be reserving the nitty-gritty details on this one for a separate video in case you want to attempt this joint yourself. But in the meantime, here's the high level.
I made a router corral off camera to keep the router inline and obedient. I mapped the interior dimensions of the jig on the table so I know where to place it. And I cobbled together this thing together. Calling it a dust shroud might be giving it too much credit, but no matter what, it'll be better than nothing. Alright, here goes nothing. And the chuck came loose. Of course it came loose. I mean, it's not too bad. It's like a 1/16 of an inch lower than it's supposed to be. But now I have to drop it down below the top of the cutter, so I'm gonna have to play some games in the cleanup phase to make it right. My nasty shroud did work, but the nature of this procedure necessitates its ability to be moved at a moment's notice. Version 2. It's slow work since the dovetail router bit is as big as an actual dove's tail. But the rest of the operation went about as smoothly as you could ask for. I've got everything measured out just so. I've made several test cuts. I should just have to run these caps through the table saw, flip them around, and then run them through again. Okay, well, apparently my table saw math is a little rusty, and I didn't factor the width of the blade into my first cap, so the whole thing is a 1/4 inch thinner than it's supposed to be. I adjusted my measurements for the other, and somehow I still cut it 1/8 of an inch too short. I didn't even bother trying to figure out how. The table saw brought the errors into this world, and by God, it can bring them back out again. Okay, we've got the basic geometry for the dovetails knocked out. Now we need to make some offset cuts in the caps and table to allow these things to mesh together. Or in fewer words, segmenting the details. On the table bottom, it's basically just squaring up the ends and the corners. And then every so often you chisel straight down. Simple as. Now we mark and cut the opposite of what we just did on the table on the caps. I would have loved to have knocked these out on the radial arm saw with a dado stack, but alas, my saw is once again too small. That's okay. Handsawing is still fun, and honestly, it probably won't take that much more time. Now I'm being a bit more cautious with this bash out, as this pine is super brittle and is just sitting here waiting for an excuse to tear out. Well, I'm not going to give it the chance. Oh, that was close. On more forgiving limbs, the excess could probably just be chiseled out, but given what it is, I'm placing the weight of this operation on my shoulder plane. Shoulder plane. Sorry. Can we take a moment to talk about the real number one on this whole project? The Lee Nielsen number one, that is. No, not a Stanley. Not a Stanley. First big project using one of these things, and I gotta say, surprisingly useful. Hard to reach places, little touch-ups, little chamfers. Personally, I don't care for the way block planes feel in my palm, and while the number one is still awkward to hold, there are at least options on how you can hold it. And I mean, just look at how cute it is. Don't you just want to pinch its little butt cheeks? Okay, moment of truth. Finally, something that went together without much fuss. That all fitting together is the green light to add some color to our table. And by color, I mean shape. And by shape, I mean paper, with shapes on them. The truth is, the shape is already within the piece, we just have to see it and reveal it. As artists. Michael Jordan said that. He also said, "Fuck them kids," which is roughly the same outlook my bandsaw has on these forms. Another nail. Rough really is the right word to describe it. That's what you get with a 1-inch wide, 2 TPI blade and a saw set as wide as a driveway. Thankfully for us, there's Harbor Freight and their dazzling assortment of discount shop equipment. Notoriously hit or miss, but take it from me, their oscillating spindle sander is a real one. When the need arises, there really is no substitute for one of these. My body was ready to unleash a full complement of Harbor Freight sanders on these parts, but even with this improvised riser block, there's like 2 workable square inches. Too many nooks and crannies. So despite my best wishes, a good old-fashioned file and sandpaper are best for this. And we're just gonna fast forward.
Big shout out to TLG Design and Fabrication for supplying the reclaimed lumber for this build. Their real specialty is end-to-end fabrication. Design, prototyping, custom installations, graphics, furniture, landscaping, any material, you name it, including reclaimed lumber. They really do it all with anything, and they do incredible work. So if you have a big custom project coming up you need a hand with, give these guys a ring. I have them linked down below. Thanks again, TLG.
Given how the last glue up went, this one feels a bit more stressful than it should. I mean, white chocolate syrup butter-ups. What if something no longer fits right? What if it all comes crashing down? What if an air bubble forms in the mortise and it doesn't want to go together? Well, I'll tell you what if. You just need to outsmart the trestle. Grab your business bar clamps and show that thing who's boss. The next one suddenly won't feel so defiant. All in all, a fine WCSBU. Now we add some pins for additional support and their captivating aesthetic qualities. Why not drawbore these pins like I did on the breadboard ends?
Listen, drawboring is great for situations where clamping isn't an option. But here, since the respective parts were already clamped down as tight as they'll ever be, it just isn't necessary. And given my track record, it would probably only introduce risk.
Double checked, and yep, this pine is still super brittle. Even easing into it with the brace is wreaking all sorts of havoc. I'm ashamed to say I made this mistake too many times before I started priming these holes with a Forstner bit, before finishing them with a brace. Oh God, say it ain't so. An operation I performed many times before, and still with the silly mistakes. Of all the mishaps thus far, these may upset my tummy the most. The glue in the gap sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm going to see what I can do to make these look less egregious. The tabletop with its litany of checked cracks and nail holes is getting a helping of epoxy filler to keep it a little more sanitary. After all, spilling milk into your tabletop cracks really would give you something to cry over. I don't know which of these holes or cracks go all the way through, and I don't want to take any chances, so I'm covering up everything. Even the voids I know don't go all the way through. What really concerns me is something weeping into the dovetail joint. I have plenty of experience dumping epoxy on floors, but I've always been somewhat resistant to wood epoxy trends. In this case, it seems like a best option. I'm using West Systems 105 resin, 207 activator, and 50 something black pigment, which is a high quality epoxy. If it's good enough for wooden boats, then it's good enough for wooden tables. Old wood like this is super absorbent, so I'm priming the larger voids with some clear. After about 10 minutes, I come back in with the proper mix. I apply with a little syringe to keep things controlled. This epoxy will cure rock hard with no flex, which does open up the possibility for cracks forming along the cracks in the future. This wood is ancient and has done the majority of its checking already, so anything to come back up would be minimal at worst. The amount of time this took really caught me off guard, and I really should have went to the bathroom before I committed to the first mix. Thankfully, there are no accidents of epoxy or trousers. Oh, except for the one hole in the dovetail I didn't patch that ended up leaking through onto the ground. I am so tempted to touch them. After about 32 hours to cure, I had at the epoxy with a palm sander. It didn't feel very productive. This is why no one likes sanding. Desperate for progress, I dispatched a half-dull card scraper on the black veins and actually started to get somewhere. It's not a one-stop solution, but no doubt saved a bunch of dust. The other reason no one likes sanding. Even when you hold the dust snout right behind the sander like a humiliated parade horse with a poop bag tied to its ass. If you've been wondering what the holes in the middle of the trestles are for, well, it's for this tall, handsome, mysterious stranger that's been lurking in the background right behind me this entire time. They call it a stretcher because it stretches from end to end. It isn't actually elastic. I tried. It will help the table stand up to racking forces. Not on its own though. On either side of the stretcher will be the literal linchpins in this whole operation. I didn't even do this on purpose, but these wedges look suspiciously like the wedges used in molding planes. Really makes you think. With everything as good as I'm willing to make it, we enter the cleanup phase. Or better put, We enter the sandstorm. Sanding feels like you've been on an odyssey lasting years. You're on a ship that will finally take you home, and then it capsizes in a tempest. You are now adrift at sea, wondering if you'll ever be done sanding again and see your family. Time goes on, and your hope erodes. Then, against all odds, you spot something way out in the distance. Could it be land? Salvation at last? No. It's actually just 220 grit. There were some bubbles that formed in the epoxy. I forgot to bring my heat gun to the party, so I'm spending some time filling these with black CA glue. Then the top gets 220'd like everything else. As a final touch, I'm adding chamfers to all the edges. Just a little something to catch the light on a Sunday morning. Catch it and put it in a glass jar, and then put that jar on a shelf in the closet with all the other light prisoner jars from all the other Sunday mornings. Hope will not find them, for there is no escape from the dark closet that holds the light. Then shut the door and forget about them forever. I'm often asked how I keep my white shirts in such pristine condition. I don't. I buy new ones and condemn the old to rags. It's kind of a beautiful life cycle if you think about it. This is tried and true boiled linseed oil. I bought it because it's food safe, but I've never used it before. Initial impressions? Very goopy. The can tells me to wipe off excess after an hour and recoat after at least 24. Burnish with quad zero steel wool between coats. And dispose of rags in water-filled bags so they don't spontaneously combust.
No, I'm being serious. Spontaneous combustion of boiled linseed oil soaked rags is a real thing. When blow cures, it generates heat. That heat compounds when it's all bunched up in rags and can generate hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit. That's a way oversimplified explanation. I could honestly talk about spontaneous combustion all day. But for now, I think it's finally time to take this table upstairs. Well, I know it's all wood joinery, but I still think we nailed it. I know it's been a little while since my last video. All right, a lot of while. But if you want a sneak peek at what I'm currently working on and latest project updates, give me a follow on Instagram, where I'm far more active than I am here. The next big project is hinted at somewhere in this video. Can you guess what it's gonna be? Plans for this table are available for purchase on my website, mujincontact.com, along with a bunch of other cool stuff, like free plans and new stickers. So if you like what I do and want to support the channel, go check that all out. Let's see, like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and even your enemies. I hope you enjoyed all this. I know I certainly did at times. Thanks for getting down to business with me today, guys. Always a pleasure. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Godspeed, you Black Emperor.